This launch of the United Nations
Good morning to you, Jaffel. Good morning, St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We're at Cabinet Room this morning for, first of all, the launch of the United Nations Global Appeal Fund. And the program is just getting on the way. And we say good morning to you and that you stay with us.
Mr. Didier Trebuc, United Nations Resident Coordinator for Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean. Dr. Didicus Jules, Director General of the Oecs Commission. Elizabeth Riley, Executive Director of the Caribbean Disaster and Emergency Management Agency, distinguished representatives of Eastern Caribbean governments, representatives of regional organizations, excellencies and members of the Diplomatic Corps, development partners, heads of agencies, programs and funds, and members of the media. Again, I would like to welcome all of you, everyone joining us for this event. My name is Michelle Brathwaite. I'm the United Nations Human Rights Advisor for Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean, as well as the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights Regional Coordinator. And again, we are here together for this launch event for the volcano response in St. Vincent and the Grenadines and the surrounding area. I would like to thank everyone for connecting virtually for this event, of course, and I just want to clarify that in addition to this Zoom platform, we are also streaming live on Facebook and YouTube. Please note that for the purposes of this event, we're going to mute all microphones, except for the speakers, of course, but you can post questions and comments in the chat box. This morning, we are honored to be joined by many of the leaders in the response effort in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, including the Prime Minister of the country, the United Nations Resident Coordinator, as well as the head of the Caribbean Sub-Regional Office for the World Food Programme, Regis Chapman, and the representative for UNICEF in this region, Alois Camaragier. So to get us started, I would like to ask Mr. Didier Trebuc, United Nations Resident Coordinator, to provide an overview of this appeal, which was prepared under his guidance and collaboration. But just before he gets started, I want to just kind of speak briefly on why we are here. We are here because on April 9th, after months of heightened activity, the La Soufrière volcano in St. Vincent and the Grenadines erupted, displacing approximately 20,000 persons. At present, over 6,000 persons are registered in public shelters, and over 6,500 are registered in private shelters. Entire villages have been covered in ash, schools and businesses have been closed, and residents are coping with limited access to clean water. The assessment of loss and damages is still ongoing, but already it is clear that there has been significant economic disruption and significant loss of livelihoods for thousands, which is only exacerbating the economic distress of a country which is still working to recover from COVID-19. Furthermore, the environmental impact of the eruption has affected neighboring islands, such as Antigua and Barbuda, Barbados, Grenada, and St. Lucia. Unfortunately, further eruptions are expected in the coming weeks and possibly months. This $29.2 million funding appeal will be critical in providing a framework of a strategic, coordinated, and inclusive response to help St. Vincent and the Grenadines on the road to recovery and reconstruction. The solidarity and support of the international community are essential to success in this area. So, if I may ask our resident coordinator, Mr. Didier Trebuc, to provide us an overview of the appeal, as well as some details regarding the situation in St. Vincent currently. Mr. Trebuc.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Michelle. Honorable Dr. Ralph Gonsalves, Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, other government ministers, representatives, excellencies, ambassadors, and development partners, the Director General of the Organization of the Eastern Caribbean States, Dr. Didicus Jules, Elizabeth Riley, Executive Director of CIDIMA, my colleague from the UN team, those accompanying me today here from WFP, UNICEF, PAHO, and all my colleagues connected by distance, members of the media, really, and everyone joining us by live streaming. Thank you very much for being here with us today. It's really a privilege for me to be here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, accompanied by my colleagues and prime ministers and the members of the government, as well as my other UNST colleague connected by distance. It's also heartening to be with the people of St. Vincent and to witness firsthand the resilience shown by Vincentians across the island, in the face of devastating circumstances. Prime Minister, we went on Sunday together to visit several areas, including into the red zone on the East Coast, up to Sandy Bay. And we'll see videos about what we saw later today in this event. And I can only describe the level of impact of the ashes and the rumbling combined with rain as apocalyptic and desolation. Some roofs have collapsed, for example, the school of Sandy Bay, due to ashes accumulated with rains. Crops have been devastated, amongst others. And the widespread disruptions caused by this event to your beautiful country and its courageous people will really forever be engraved in my mind. The devastating impact of this event on thousands of people is undeniable. However, after witnessing the wide efforts deployed so far by your government, Prime Minister, and the people of St. Vincent, I'm also full of hope and must congratulate you. There were no deaths. Prime Minister, you can count on the UN as your partner, working with your government and regional institutions such as CIDIMA and the Oecs to ensure a swift response and a resilient recovery. The launch of this UN Global Funding Appeal for La Soufrière volcano response in St. Vincent and the Grenadines and neighboring affected countries reflects the commitment of the entire United Nations family to St. Vincent and the region. The same was expressed by the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, when he conveyed a few days ago his deepest solidarity with the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines and the region. Let me turn to the impact, and my colleague Michel already mentioned a few of the figures, but around 15,000 people have been displaced from the orange and red zones. That accounts for around 15% of the populations. And those evacuated households from the northern area are known to have higher indices of poverty on the islands, hence are most vulnerable. But overall, I want to stress that this is the vast majority of the population on this island that has been affected. 6,200 persons are registered in shelters, and this is, of course, increasing every day. And around 6,500 also registered as displaced in private homes, hence also placing the host in a vulnerable situation. 2 out of 5 hospitals were impacted in affected areas and evacuated, and this is even putting more pressure on the rest of the health system, which has to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic. And it was estimated that possibly 15,000 to 20,000 people may be at risk of food insecurity due to this situation. But I'm sure, Prime Minister, you will provide many more insight on the situations. What I want to say, and I feel it's important here, is that we are dealing with a crisis within the COVID crisis. We fear the risk of spike in COVID cases, especially with people in shelters. Moreover, this is a very uncertain and complex situation where new eruptions may occur. Another one occurred 2 days ago. So the situation can deteriorate as well rapidly. And the hurricane season is just about to start in 6 weeks, and it has already been predicted to be likely above average. And this simply illustrates the complex layers of challenges that seeds face and that once again we have to overcome. The impact of ash falls and rumblings for these disasters are diverse. Limited reliable to access to water, even though this is being reconnected progressively. Limited access to food given the situation, even though a lot is being done to currently in the short term feed people. Loss of the assets in terms of houses, but also community infrastructure of crops and livestock. Health facilities being affected. The loss of livelihood for the families is undeniable. The disruption in the continuity of education, and many schools are currently used, even though closed, but used as shelters. We also face an immense challenge in terms of logistics, both for the cleanup, but also the repairs of those affected infrastructures and buildings, and also right now a challenge for the delivery of the assistance. And I'm sure again that, Prime Minister, you will further elaborate on this and many more. I wish to stress that the ashfall has also affected other countries like Barbados, especially St. Lucia and Grenada as well, and this may compromise in those islands too, the public health, infrastructure, agriculture and tourism across all the islands. So, regarding the UN response, Prime Minister requested the assistance of the United Nations, and we also received a request from Barbados. And as a result, the UN has mobilized the humanitarian interventions across its various agencies. Currently, WFP, UNICEF, PAHO, WHO are the first responders on the ground and with me today, and others like FAO, UNFPA, or UN Women have donated several supplies. We have currently allocated close to $2 million to support the government in the response, including $1 million accrued through the Central Emergency Response Fund, especially for drinking water and hygiene, as well supported by UNICEF and PAHO, as well as cash transfer intervention to help the displaced people with food and basic supplies in shelters, supported by WFP, and again working through the national mechanisms that are in place. The United Nations Environment Programme is also this week deploying a team of experts in collaboration with the European Union and OCHA this week to support the cleanup and the disposal of ashes, and also address the issue of environmental health and provide the necessary expertise in this regard. PAHO donated many health equipment and PPEs such as masks. Let me turn now to the appeal. As agreed with Prime Minister Gonçalves, this funding appeal intends to mobilize the solidarity from the international community. Through the various UN agencies, we would be then able to scale up our support to St. Vincent and the region for at least 6 months. So we are launching today a $29.2 million global funding appeal. This is an effort to protect the most vulnerable, displaced or affected people in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and also in possibly neighboring affected countries. And there are 2 pillars in this response that we have considered: the immediate humanitarian response, so as to provide time-sensitive and life-saving humanitarian interventions, but also with a view to initiate the recovery and the rehabilitation. Of course, more will be needed once the whole scope of damages, losses and needs will have been fully assessed. Interventions, as you can see on the screen, are divided among 8 sectors. 8 sectors being first what we call water and sanitation and hygiene, food security and livelihood through different modalities, should it be kits or cash vouchers, shelter and housing, and those 3 sectors, I would say, are our 3 immediate priorities in terms of humanitarian response. Then the health, to strengthen the health system capacities and prevent further COVID spike. Then the cleanup of the ashes, the necessary equipment for this, and addressing the related environmental health issues. Then ensuring continuity of education. Then 6, the restoration of the agriculture. I want to remind that St. Vincent is a country that has a very vivid agricultural sector, so that's a very important area for recovery. 7th, protection in terms of gender-based violence or child protections who are in shelter or precarious conditions. And finally, logistics, and I have spoken about that. So, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I really want today to launch a call for action. Greater international support is urgently needed. This will allow us to rapidly scale up our support to the government and the people of St. Vincent to respond to this growing humanitarian crisis unfolding before our eyes. We have no time to lose, as we have to prevent a multiple crisis scenario. It is with this in mind that, along with my colleagues from the UN team from Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean, and with Prime Minister Gonçalves here today, we make an urgent appeal to ramp up international solidarity and support for St. Vincent and the Grenadines and the other affected neighboring countries through an immediate contribution to this UN global funding appeal as one of the vehicles that is being offered amongst others. So I would like to thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being with us today. I thank you, Prime Minister, for the trust, and let us endeavor to work together. And I'm sure you will agree with me, Prime Minister, let us really truly be our brothers and sisters keeper. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tribute, for your comments with regard to the dire circumstances right now in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, the priorities for the humanitarian response, and again highlighting the SIDS vulnerabilities, especially in natural disasters. But now I would like to actually speak a little bit more about the situation in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So it is my honor to invite the Dr. Honorable Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Ralph Gonsalves, to give the keynote address for this event. Thank you very much, Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, and good day to everyone. I first of all want to say how appreciative we are in St. Vincent and the Grenadines to the United Nations for the launch of this Global Appeal Fund. I want everyone to know that prior to the volcanic eruptions in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we have been a country seeking to develop ourselves with the assistance of our friends overseas, and we arrived at a level of development which is at the upper middle income level in the Human Development Index. In other words, the society which has a certain material level, it has a civilized way of life and living, a functioning democracy. Of course, we have extreme poverty and we have vulnerabilities. And the vulnerabilities are many-sided, most of them not of our making. They've come to us from outside. We have lived with this volcano for centuries. It erupted on the last occasion in 1979, 42 years ago. Effusive eruptions began late last year, oozing eruptions. And then on April the 9th, 12 days ago, we had the first of the explosions. And since then, our country has been put into veritable economic and social tailspin, and where lives and livelihoods have been threatened immensely. Yesterday at the Security Council, I said the following in a summary form. I said St. Vincent and the Grenadines has been in the throes of a series of volcanic eruptions on the island of St. Vincent. As a consequence, nearly 1/5 of the island's population has had to be evacuated to safer areas. A monumental challenge of humanitarian relief, inclusive of security considerations, recovery, and reconstruction, face us. Without effective cooperation between our country, the United Nations, and our regional, sub-regional organizations, our life and living would be wholly unbearable. Without an enhancement of this cooperation, the relief effort would be stymied, and the prospects for our recovery and reconstruction would be dismal. I ended my statement at the Security Council with the following words. I said, please help St. Vincent and the Grenadines in its midnight hour of need. The northern 1/3 of our country is in a state of desolation. This is an area which historically and in this contemporary period, the people have relied upon agriculture, animal husbandry, and fishing and some tourism. None of that exists anymore. And it is going to take a long period of time to have the economy in the northern one-third of the island of St. Vincent, the main island in the chain of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, to have that area recovered and reconstructed. The plants have to be replanted. The bananas, the plantains, the sweet potatoes, the vegetables, they're all gone. Completely destroyed by ash. The trees are denuded of their leaves and many of them broken, which means that the fruit trees, including the coconut and breadfruit trees, we have to plant over, and they take much longer. People are not going to be able to go back into that area for quite a while. As has been indicated, over 12,000 persons are either in 88 shelters, emergency shelters run by the government, or in private homes. People, families and friends and strangers have opened their homes to those from the northern one-third of the country. In addition to taking care of those persons in shelters, to put a roof over their heads, we have to feed them every day. We have to attend to them in terms of their medical needs. We have had to provide water. We had to truck the water in, and the water has had to come from neighboring islands. Thankfully, we are getting back the system bit by bit, but it is still way short of what is the normal situation. There are problems involving with sanitation, actual human conditions of life and living. They're terribly affected. The schools have been disrupted because most of the shelters are schools, primary and secondary schools. You can just imagine not just the impact on the education of the children, but the psychosocial pressures which have been brought upon them and their parents and their families. The issues really here are matters which we just cannot handle by ourselves. We're a small island developing state. We have been the victims of climate change, and we don't produce the greenhouse gases. That has come to us from outside. COVID didn't originate here, but we have to address it, and we have been addressing it for the past year and a bit. A small country with limited resources, but a resilient and hard-working people, magnificent examples of our Caribbean civilization, a thriving democracy, lifting our living standards and our human development index. We have been set back decades. And the uncertainty is very troubling, very disturbing. We don't know whether this is going to be 4 months, 6 months, 9 months. So we need your help. I want to give an indication as to the kinds of assets which are at risk. The World Bank has done a preliminary disaster resilience analytics and solutions presentation. In the red and the orange zone, that is the volcanic hazard zones, the total built asset at risk are evaluated at approximately $387.5 million US. In the red zone alone, the replacement value of residential buildings is US $64 million. Non-residential buildings, $106 million US. And infrastructure, which is there, infrastructure at risk, and much of it has been damaged, $83 million US. And then we have to address the economic loss to which I alluded earlier, and the immediate humanitarian concerns. The United Nations group has indicated what we require with their involvement for social protection, for health, for education, for water and sanitation and hygiene, for shelter and housing, for food security, for livelihood strengthening, and for agriculture and animal husbandry, and very critically, to deal with the ash. In the northern zone, there are 12, 14, 16 inches or more of ash on the ground. In some places, even houses, the ash got into houses and has risen to the level of the handle of people's refrigerators. I'm giving you a graphic idea that even inside of the houses, where the houses are closed up, the ash got through various places. And that, to see it is really to believe it. And the words used by the United Nations Coordinator for Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean, desolate and apocalyptic, are quite appropriate in the circumstances. Clearly the situation is evolving, and the extent of the damage is not well known as yet. I can say to you about things which are at risk and what we need immediately for the humanitarian relief, and what we need to begin the process of cleaning up. And then, of course, there's recovery and reconstruction. The UN system has been assisting, and our regional system. And you'll hear from the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States and SEDIMA, the Agency for Disaster Management in our region. And there are other regional institutions which have been helpful. And other governments have, across the world, in the region and elsewhere, have indicated that they would help. In all of this, I want you to bear in mind that these particular areas are the areas where we have most of the poor and vulnerable people in our country. And their lives and livelihoods have been severely disrupted and will be so for a very long time. And overall, the economy and society of our country in a terrible mess because of what has happened at La Soufrière with the eruptions. Now, what do we do? The global community can shrug their shoulders and say, well, this is just another disaster. Life goes on. I have a more optimistic view of one another in this world. I think the global community will help. and there are indications that you would help. And this is a very tangible way for persons to help. We have a UN system which is up and running. It is legitimate. It is something which is endorsed by the government. Similarly, the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, they have a platform for assistance. So too, SEDIMA, and our own government has its disaster relief fund, and its missions overseas have set up accounts and platforms for persons to assist. I know that other entities may wish to raise money to help us. I just want to caution that those who are giving, unless you are sure that that entity has been authorized by the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, that you have available to you other avenues like this platform of the United Nations, this global appeal which we are making. In 6 weeks' time, the Atlantic hurricane season begins. It's predicted to be a more than active season. We have pre-existing challenges. We have COVID, we have the volcanic eruptions, and the looming Atlantic season, the hurricane season. You may say that that's a lot for us to bear. We can bear it with your help. And one way in which you can help is to support this United Nations Response Global Appeal Fund. You will be helping St. Vincent and the Grenadines in this, its midnight hour of need. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister Gonzalez, for those vivid and moving words regarding what St. Vincent and the Grenadines is facing. The Caribbean stands with you, which is why I'm happy to now introduce the Director General of the OECS, Dr. Didicus Jules, to provide a statement on behalf of the Commission.
Wonderful speech.
Dr. Jules.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Prime Minister, Dr. the Honorable Ralph Gonzalez, members of Cabinet, members of Parliament, the UN Resident Coordinator, Mr. Didier Trebu, Executive Director of SEDIMA, Ms. Elizabeth Riley, Head of NEMO St. Vincent and the Grenadines, senior public officers, members of the media, colleagues, all. Currently, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, as we all know, stands at the epicenter of catastrophe, and it finds itself hard hit by climate change, pandemic, economic constriction, and now volcanic eruption. And this has been adequately described by Prime Minister Gonzalez. But in our Caribbean, there are also several concentric circles of love. And St. Vincent and the Grenadines stands battered but not broken, surrounded and sheltered, embraced and enveloped by these concentric circles of love. The Organization of Eastern Caribbean States is honored to stand as a regional inner ring in that concentric circle, joining with the expanding circles of Caribbean solidarity, and today associating with the global expression of love that the United Nations represent. We pledge our support and collaboration with the UN system in its effort to rally the global community in embracing the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines in this hour of need. The OECS Stronger Together campaign, the logo for which, the graphic for which you see behind me, is designed to achieve several critical objectives in response to the humanitarian situation in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The first is to execute the decisions of the OECS authority in relation to an OECS-wide response to this situation. The second is to provide as much diplomatic, material, and financial support needed by the principal disaster response agencies managing this crisis, and that is SEDIMA, the seismic unit of the University of the West Indies, the Regional Security System, and CAFA. And it is important that we not overlook the importance of CAFA in this compounded situation of volcanic eruption in a time of COVID. To establish also a coalition of private sector philanthropic foundations and other sources of financial, material, and technical assistance to the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and in so doing, to bring to this circle of solidarity new sources of support that may not have been previously available. This coalition has already been established with 150 agencies and has had prior experience led by the Global Leadership Forum, Nigel Salina, have had previous experiences in dealing with hurricane situations in Louisiana with Katrina, in Dominica with Maria, and with Dorian in the Bahamas. The work of the coalition is being overseen in this instance by an advisory board that we have established for the purposes of transparency and accountability, that is being chaired by the Right Honorable Sir Dennis Byron, former president of the CCJ, and comprising also a senior political representative of the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines in the person of Minister of Finance, the Honorable Camilo Gonzalez. All assistance mobilized is being channeled to the support the lead agencies in this disaster and to the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Prime Minister Gonzalez has already urged persons to be careful with the sources to which they provide assistance, and has identified those that are recognized by the government of St. Vincent, including their own disaster fund. We are seized by the urgency of the moment, which requires agile responsiveness, careful coordination, and an absolute focus on the rapidly evolving needs of the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And I think we have all seen on television, on social media, the images that speak to the resilience, the courage, and the determination of the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. But even while doing so, we are also painfully conscious of the necessity of thinking strategically, and even in the urgency of response, the importance of initiatives that will provide the foundation for socio-economic regeneration. Since the launch of the Oecs Stronger Together campaign, the regional and international response has been encouraging and heartwarming, and is aligned to the critical areas identified by the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and the response framework described by Didier Tribu of the UN system. While the detailed assessments are being made, from early the Oecs recognized that a starting consideration for meaningful action is nothing less than 100 million US. And I think the figures called out by Prime Minister Gonzalez really do substantiate that nothing less than a cash response of 100 million is necessary in this time. And that is why we've set this as our target. Allow me in ending to just provide two quick examples of the type of response that we consider to be a perfect marriage of the immediate and the strategic. So we have had since the eruption an explosion of millions of tons of ash, as well as a growing problem of plastic that has been occasioned by the disaster, because water is, as we've heard, is a critical need, and a lot of water is being shipped into St. Vincent in small containers, in drinking bottles, and so on. So we are concerned that while we are responding to the needs of water and thirst in the country, that we're not also solving that problem by creating a plastic pollution problem. And the Oecs has had several initiatives relating to plastic reduction that we are now going to be rolling out in a much expanded manner in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. But we've also been encouraging the member states of the Oecs in sending water to St. Vincent to do so by barge. And we have the support of French private entrepreneurs with a barge capable of moving 50 40-foot containers. And we've been using this not only to collect items in containers across the Oecs, but also to move water in bulk, and moving also water tanks for delivery. thus reducing the tendency for increased inflows of plastic bottled water. We also have the opportunity of turning ash to cash. And in discussions held with the government of Norway, who have been very responsive, they have pointed us to an experience in the Pacific where ash, together with recycled plastic, is being used to create bricks for construction. So we think that we are exploring this and are in active discussions with them on moving into St. Vincent with the possibility, as well as we've invited the government of Barbados, who have been seriously collaterally impacted by the eruption, to be part of this initiative of moving ash to cash. Prime Minister Gonzalez also spoke to the critical need for the continuity of learning. And I'm happy to announce that in working with one of the coalition partners, within less than 4 days, we have now configured, and we are going to test this out in this coming week, a school in a mobile phone app that will enable all of the learning to happen in the centers, the shelters, and at homes to enable this to happen. We therefore strongly align with the efforts being made, and we want to support and encourage the people and the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines to keep their courage up. We are with you in the Caribbean, and we will be with you through this long, dark night to a journey of regeneration and hope. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jules, for those words, those encouraging words of solidarity and support. I would now like to hand over to another critical partner. Elizabeth Riley is the Executive Director of the Caribbean Disaster Emergency and Management Agency, who will now join us for a few remarks. Thank you, Ms. Riley. Ms. Riley, you can start anytime. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Dr. the Honorable Ralph Gonzalez, Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and members of Cabinet, Mr. Didier Tribuc, United Nations Resident Coordinator for Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean, Dr. Didicus Jules, Director General of the Oecs Commission, senior officials of the Government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, members of the media, good morning. The Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency stands in solidarity with the government and people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I wish to thank the Honorable Prime Minister and the United Nations Resident Coordinator for inviting SEDIMA to be a part of today's launch. I set SEDIMA's statement of support for the UN Global Funding Appeal for the La Soufrière volcano response for St. Vincent and the Grenadines and the affected countries within the context of three things. First, people. Today's launch is about people. People who are mothers, fathers, sons and daughters, whose lives and livelihoods have been disrupted, in many cases permanently. It is also about supporting the work of those people whose actions will alleviate that suffering. I take this moment to salute Ms. Michelle Forbes, Director of the National Emergency Management Organization, and the team of the National Emergency Management System, who continue to work tirelessly and at great personal sacrifice. I also salute the people and institutions of the Caribbean community, which have rallied in support of St. Vincent and the Grenadines through surge support horizontal cooperation arrangements for the Emergency Operations Center, damage assessment, and relief management. This is being delivered through the SEDIMA Coordinated Regional Response Mechanism. I thank the UN for its commitment to supporting the persons impacted and the work of those who lead in alleviating it. This is consistent with the principles of our comprehensive disaster management strategy. Second, partnership. It is no coincidence that the Caribbean Development Partner Group is co-chaired by the SEDIMA Executive Director and the United Nations Resident Coordinator. This reflects the importance of the partnership between the regional and the international. The reality is that we can accomplish so much more working together than working apart. I wish to thank the UN family for its commitment to partnership within the context of the national level governance structures and the regional response mechanism. And finally, possibilities. As we meet today, in the midst of the humanitarian response, we must also cast our eyes forward to recovery and the vision for a more resilient future for the government and people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The report of the Detailed Damage Sector Assessment Team, coordinated under the Regional Response Mechanism and comprising national, regional, and international partners, is scheduled for presentation tomorrow, April the 21st, and will be instructive in this regard. We know that the needs will be significant and they will be ongoing for some time. And we thank the international community in advance for your continued support. SEDIMA supports the UN Global Funding Appeal and remains committed to standing side by side you, Honorable Prime Minister, the government, and the people for the long haul, confident that St. Vincent and the Grenadines will emerge stronger and more resilient. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Riley, both for your kind words as well as the work, the incredible work that your organization is doing. I would like to remind the audience that we will have a brief question and answer session very shortly. But before that, we would like to just showcase some of the images of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, the effect of the eruption and how it has affected people's lives. Please.
So just a quick reminder, you're listening to live coverage of the launch of the United Nations Global Appeal at Cabinet Room. What is happening now is a showcase of images captured of some of the damage. We ask that you stay with us.
When we travel another 5-7 minutes, you will see you'll be entering the major part of the Red Zone.
Of that incredible video showing some of the devastating images from St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I would now like to open up the question and answer session to the media. Please feel free to identify any questions or yourself in the chat box, and we will be happy to ask your questions. We currently don't seem to have any questions pending so far. So what I will do is that I will hand over, I do understand there's some press joining the Prime Minister and the resident coordinator in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So I will hand it over to the press secretary over there for our colleagues to field questions in St. Vincent.
Well, you can provide, you can ask the questions now. This is the opportunity for anyone on the local media if you have any issues.
Does the Prime Minister or Mr. Trebuch have any?
Yeah.
Field any questions?
Prime Minister,
Yeah, there's a microphone here.
morning to all. My name is Robertson Henry. I'm actually representing Reuters. Prime Minister, attempts were made to provide evacuation avenues for persons, and those persons have refused or been reluctant to evacuate to other countries. How difficult is that making the recovery process?
I would say that almost all the persons in the red zone have been evacuated. There are some sturdy souls, a few of them who still remain, numerically small number. What happened 2 days after the volcano erupted cataclysmically, erupted explosively, we still sent on the eastern side of the island, where you had road problems, because by that time the roads, the road infrastructure was severely damaged in important parts of the northeastern side, and which is a difficult side because it's the Atlantic side for vessels to land. Well, fortunately we had built a fisheries complex with a wharf in Oecs, which is one of the northernmost villages on the eastern side. And on 5 separate occasions we sent the Coast Guard vessels there to take up persons, and in the 5 days subsequent to the first 2 days, we brought out 127 persons. So we think that in the northern area, they constituted the bulk of those who remained. But of course, there are persons on the western side who also came up. It was easier on the western side to come up by sea, because that's the Caribbean side, and you have many jetties on that side, and there was the road system was not as badly damaged, and in any event you could get out easier by sea. But to give you an indication as to how we value each life, and I want the persons who are listening, and that the individuals whom I'm asking to support this appeal, as Liz Riley pointed out eloquently, that this is about people, human beings, mothers, fathers, sons, daughters, grandfathers, grandmothers. The information had come to me that there was a young man, 19 years old, who had some mental challenges, and someone who had influence over him had urged him not to leave, and sent the Coast Guard for him. For instance, on one specific day, they, with 2 uncles of his, they didn't find him. Fortunately, they got 13 other persons who came. And then on the last occasion, well, I asked the commander of the Coast Guard, and the commander naturally presented all the reasons, logically, why they shouldn't go back, because the seas were dangerous. It's the Atlantic side. We're putting the Coast Guard, men and women, at their lives at risk. It is an expensive business. The ash was damaging the engines of the Coast Guard vessels. But I said to the Coast Guard that this young man, he is the symbol of our humanity. He is the manifestation of our hope, of our faith. He represents, like every individual, our future. And thankfully, the commander of the Coast Guard sent his team again with the 2 uncles. And on this occasion, we got him out with 11 other persons. That's the final time we went up there. And with a couple of goats and a dog. So, every single individual is important to us. And we have a very strong family sense, and there's a great social solidarity in the country. And it is so in the Caribbean as a whole, not just with CARICOM, the Caribbean community, and the politicians and the governments, but with ordinary people. And that solidarity will help to see us through. But we need help. We need technical assistance in a number of different areas, and we need financial resources to help us in this humanitarian relief period and for the reconstruction. But without this social solidarity among our people, the humanitarian relief effort would not be very successful, and our recovery and reconstruction would be suboptimal. Thank God, this social solidarity is evident in the number of families who took in their friends, and families, and strangers. But those persons are vulnerable. They have to be fed. They have The children have to be schooled. And then, of course, there are those in the shelters. And that is why, for all the reasons spelled out and with the subheadings provided by the UN group and endorsed by the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we need the resources to do things, not to make people live normally, because you can't live normally when you're outside of your homes and the area is still in a state of desolation, but to live as normal as is humanly possible in all these terrible circumstances.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your response, Mr. Prime Minister. I would now like to acknowledge that the Cuban ambassador has indicated a desire to make an intervention. If I may ask the Cuban ambassador to unmute his mic and provide a brief 30-second intervention. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very, very much. Distinguished PM, Ralph Gonzalez, distinguished coordinator of UN, Oecs Commission, and CIDIMA representative. A very short statement. We, in the Caribbean, we have been the lucky one. We don't only have the wonderful and resilient, brave people, and a very nice Caribbean Sea. Mother Nature gave us also strong winds, hurricanes, volcano eruption, and destruction. But, Prime Minister, sister and brother from, you could always count on the usual assistance from Cuba. We have been assisting St. Vincent and the Grenadines for long years with the Medical Brigade. On the occasion of COVID-19, we sent a team of doctors and nurses, and right now every one of them are assisting our brothers and sisters. We knew that our President of the Republic, Diaz-Canel, as well as our Minister of Foreign Affairs, Bruno, sent a message to you indicating our willingness to cooperate in the assistance of St. Vincent as the Grenadines. As you know, we don't give what we have to spare, but we share what little we have. And we will continue assisting St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and be sure that St. Vincent and the Grenadines and the people will recover and bright again. Thank you very much. All the best.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that intervention, Ambassador. We also have a question in the chat box from Juhail Brown. The question is, good morning. CARICOM countries like Trinidad and Tobago have been providing relief and other assistance to St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Should there be a special funding arrangement for regional bodies, such as CARICOM, for events like natural disasters to better streamline the financial response to such events and ensure that money goes to where it's supposed to go? Further, what guarantee is there that money being donated to the UN or the governments from other countries and organizations will go to where it needs to go in St. Vincent and the Grenadines? This is from a reporter in Trinidad and Tobago. I would like to present that question to either the Prime Minister or Mr. Trebuc. Thank you.
Well, I will answer the general aspects and the specific issue concerning those for the UN, what comes on the UN, this UN appeal that the UN rep would answer. We have existing some mechanisms. There is, first of all, to address natural disasters, we have the Caribbean Catastrophe Risk Insurance Facility, the CRIFT. It doesn't cover, the premiums don't cover volcanoes. However, the CRIFT has donated as a ex gratia payment. Because we have been, St. Vincent and Grenadines has been part of CRIFT since 2007. They gave 2.2 million US dollars, 6 million EC dollars. There is a CARICOM Development Fund within the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas, and that fund provides certain developmental funding. Then there is, of course, the Caribbean Development Bank, which is a developmental institution, which, again, we can get a certain amount of funding. We in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we established a contingency fund, and we are funding out of this fund monies for this very humanitarian effort. Without that funding, we would not have been able to do some of the things which we are doing even currently. Of course, when we set up the contingency fund and we fund it with a specific measure, tax measure, there was some criticism, but now people understand that that fund was really established to assist the poor and those who are disadvantaged, especially during times of disaster. And of course, I should point out that last year, in negotiating from the World Bank, we asked for a particular window at the World Bank, and we didn't use the money. We asked it be put to this particular window, which is called the CAT-DDO at the World Bank, the catastrophic risk, the catastrophic drawdown deferred option. All monies coming to St. Vincent and the Grenadines to the Accountant General are subjected to the Finance Administration Act. Any monies go to the offices of our missions overseas are subject to the Finance Administration Act. Everything is accountable for, and on May the 13th, May the 11th, we go to Parliament with a supplementary appropriation bill and a supplementary estimates. I informed the leader of the opposition yesterday that we'll be doing that. So our processes, our internal democratic and accountability processes would be at work, because we cannot spend more than a certain amount of money by way of special warrants, executive action, without it being specifically approved by the Parliament of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So my brother Brown from Trinidad, these are matters which are subject to our own legislative framework. In relation to monies raised by the United Nations, the UN rep will indicate to you how those monies raised by this appeal would be spent, where they would be spent, and how they would be accounted for.
Thank you, Prime Minister, and thank you for this question. That's indeed a very, very important one, and I can assure that the UN will follow its whole accountability standards and transparency standards to report on a regular basis on how the resources that will be channeled for implementation through the various UN agencies will be implemented, as is currently done in terms of the ongoing deployment. We also follow, regarding the humanitarian intervention, I would say, highest humanitarian standards internationally agreed. We have also set up coordination mechanisms, as this funding appeal, which represents the response plan of the UN system, is going to be our framework for all the UN system agencies, funds and programs to work together under coordinated, transparent mechanisms that is going to provide not only to the contributors, the donors, but also the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, our national government counterparts, full information, because we are working with them on the ground on a daily basis. And I want to say that all those resources that are going to be raised and turned into concrete activities, support to the people, to the families that are currently suffering, will be in support of all the national mechanisms that is in place. National ownership for the UN system is critical, and that will be our main objective, to strengthen national capacities, to make sure that we build further resilience and capacities in this crisis and while we recover from this crisis.
Thank you very much. May I just say that I omitted to mention that that SEDIMA is interfacing, and we have asked it to interface with agencies, development agencies, for whatever funding, come from certain development agencies, and they will work with the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and they have their own accounting and transparency procedures. I just want everyone to know that while we have been, over the last 45 minutes or thereabouts, we have been getting bouts of shaking of this building, indicating that there's some earthquake movements which are affecting us. I think. Did you feel them, Didier? Did you feel the shaking?
A little bit.
You felt it a little bit. I don't know how, Michelle, you felt it. I don't know how big is it? It is, but it's, well, I just say that. I just felt it. The journalists, you guys felt it too?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, not just guys, but also the young ladies.
Thank you very much for your response, Prime Minister, as well as Mr. Tribuc. I would like to acknowledge that the Embassy of Venezuela has also reiterated its support to St. Vincent and the Grenadines during its recovery effort. We now have a question from our colleague at UK Aid, Stefan Kossoff. Please go ahead, unmute your mic and ask your question. Thank you.
Prime Minister, Didier, other esteemed colleagues, I hope you can hear me well. Firstly, thank you so much for setting out in such graphic and moving terms the scale of destruction and the human impact in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, but also for underlining some really life-affirming stories of resilience, solidarity and courage from those most affected and people working at the coal face or volcano face, I should say. Apocalyptic was the term that you used, Didier. I think existential would be another appropriate adjective to describe the scale of the challenge faced by the people most affected, but also the country more generally. And with that in mind, Prime Minister, I know you've had an opportunity already to speak with our Minister, Lord Ahmed, over the last week, but I want to underline once again that the UK stands shoulder to shoulder with the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. As you know, we've already provided some initial support through SEDIMA to support the emergency effort on the ground and all the various damage and needs assessments that are taking place now. We were also a major contributor to the UN SURF, which Didier has said already has been mobilised. We stand ready to provide further support in response to this appeal, and going forward, we also hope to use our substantial bilateral development programme to support the long-term recovery effort. And Prime Minister, our collaboration on the St. Vincent port with the Caribbean Development Bank becomes even more important in this regard. I just had a couple of quick questions I would like to ask.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but we are on a very short schedule, so if you could ask your questions very quickly. Thank you.
Okay, 2 questions. One, we're really concerned about issues around vaccine hesitancy, and I know the Prime Minister was concerned about this even before the volcano struck. It'll be useful to understand how those issues are being tackled in the context of the crisis to ensure we avoid the worst of a multiple overlapping crisis in St. Vincent. Second question to the UN, really useful to set out the breadth of the appeal response here. We'd be really grateful to have a further breakdown of the individual areas and activities that are being proposed so we can calibrate our UK response. I'd be grateful to hear from Didier about when we will receive such a breakdown, and also how the UN is working alongside other actors, including the World Bank and the IFIs, to ensure the most effective collective response to the challenge that we face. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your questions, Mr. Kossoff. Didier, did you want to respond quickly?
Yes, quickly, and of course we'll be in close contact with all potential contributors and member state donors, such as yourself, anyone who is interested to contribute, and we really call on you to make very quick and urgent contributions. We'll provide the necessary breakdowns by sectors, by specific impact as well, and we work all those details together. So the intention really has been in a very short amount of time to provide has holistic view of the situation in order to mobilize the support from the international community, and in the coming days we'll be working hand in hand with all of you so that we can operationalize this plan with the necessary details. Should they be financial, should it be in terms of numbers and beneficiaries and actions to be rolled out. So we look forward to working with you on this in the coming days. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I beg your pardon.
I would like to reiterate my gratitude and that of the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines to the United Kingdom government for its ongoing partnership with us and for the assistance thus far in this the series of volcanic eruptions. I have spoken on the COVID issue before with the Foreign Secretary of the United Kingdom, Dominic Raab. I have also had a good conversation with Lord Ahmad, who is the Minister of State in the Commonwealth office in that part of the Foreign Ministry. And I'm sure that we will continue to work together. I want to indicate that the royal family has reached out to us, and later today I would be receiving a telephone call from His Royal Highness Prince Charles, and I want to thank the royal family for their interest in St. Vincent and the Grenadines and our people. And of course to all other governments who have provided assistance or who have indicated such. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those words, Prime Minister. I'm afraid that we have run out of time for this event right now. However, I would like to let the audience know and to encourage you to connect to a virtual press event, which will be starting at 11 a.m., so very shortly, which will feature again the Prime Minister Gonzalez, as well as the resident coordinator on webtv.un.org. For those who left comments in the chat box, we will do our best to get back to you. But in the meantime, I would like to very much thank everyone who joined us this morning and participated in this event. And of course, I would like to commend the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines for their resilience in the face of adversity. And we assure you that you remain in our hearts and our thoughts during this very difficult time. Thank you very much for all of the partners and colleagues who joined us today. I expect that we will all encounter each other as we continue to work on this response effort. Thank you very much again.